Hello, friends. Welcome back to Heartscapes, where we're learning the system of Reiki to live lives that are rooted, spacious, connected, and that provision us well for the journey home to ourselves. My name is Michaela. Welcome back to the channel. One of the areas of life that these qualities that the system of Reiki brings to us has been so impactful in my life and has caused me to spend many hours working with colleagues and clients and here on this channel on this topic is in the experience of grief. Reclaiming the beauty and the healing potential of grieving well is one of the just incredible gifts that the system of Reiki has brought to my life and to many other people's lives. And so it's a topic that I want to continue digging into. And I'm so grateful that I have an amazing colleague who can help me do that through her particular expertise. I'm going to introduce you to her in just a moment. To help us settle into this topic, I'm going to open us with a quote from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the woman who first codified the 5 stages of grief. She tells us that the pain of loss is so intense, so heartbreaking, because in loving, we deeply connect with another human being. And grief is the reflection of the connection that has been lost. We think we want to avoid the grief, but really, it is the pain of loss that we want to avoid. Grief is the healing process that ultimately brings us comfort in our pain. And this idea of grief as a healing process is not only a powerful and useful one, but one that is deeply countercultural. So I want to invite my dear friend and teaching apprentice, Blair Graves, into this conversation because Blair, you are uniquely suited to help us have this conversation and to work with me to create an offering specifically around this topic. So welcome, my friend.
Thanks. I'm Blair, and I am a Reiki practitioner, as Michaela mentioned, and I'm also an End of Life Doula. When my father died in 2018, I really did not know how to grieve at all. And I was sort of rudderless in that process for a solid year and a half until I started death doula training. And that sort of helped me find my way through my grief. And one of the things that we studied in death doula training was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. And a lot of people know what they've heard of it, but they don't necessarily have an understanding that is accurate of what those are. And I think that a lot of people believe them to be very formulaic, and they're not. You can experience all or, just very few of them. You might experience depression and then go back into denial. It can present like a spiral, and it's not meant to be linear. So through my death doula training, I began to recognize the 5 stages of grief, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I began to recognize those in my grief journey about my dad and how they were relevant to my experience. And it was when I began to study Reiki with Michaela from the perspective of its Japanese origins, which has a greater emphasis on the precepts. I began to connect my own grief experiences with the precepts and began to observe how they interacted with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you started talking to me about that, it was like it clicked so strongly that this powerful pathway that Kubler-Ross designed in, codifying the 5 stages of grief and really observing the way they operate in our life, the way that you got to observe it in your experience, that this is a powerful framework for reclaiming the transformative human experience of grief. And that when we apply the precepts of the system of Reiki into the practice of the 5 stages of grief, we have this beautiful companion. We have this roadmap that really helps us to navigate the what you call the spiral nature and the dynamic nature of how we experience the stages of grief, which, as you said, is not linear. It's dynamic, it's individual, and it's something that we need to be prepared to navigate so that we can grieve well and get through that experience of healing that grief truly does offer us when we engage it. The way that we tend to hold grief in Western culture, really does not set us up well for healing through the grieving process. Our culture is fairly death and grief avoidant. It's kind of seen as this necessary inconvenience. We want to get through it as quickly as possible. We want other people to get through it as quickly as possible because it's so uncomfortable. It's this interruption of normal life and business as usual rather than this sacred human rite of passage that's so intimately tied with our experience of love and connection, which is, just fundamental to being a human. So, when we, work with the precepts, as you started to do and started to see the ways in which these simple foundational practices that are the foundation of the system of Reiki. I mean, the system of Reiki, as we discuss on this channel quite often, is built on this foundation of this simple description of how we will experience our life, free from attachment to our fear and our anger, rooted in gratitude, which helps keep us in the moment and present to what is happening right now, being true to ourselves, our way and our being as a spiritual creature in the world, and also an animal in the world with one little life to live here in this body at least. And of course, above all, rooted in compassion for ourselves and for each other. And these precepts give us another layer for working through grief in a way that helps us to grieve well, to become responsive to what we're experiencing in the moment, rather than what we think or we're told that we should be experiencing in our grief. They help us to develop a practice to assess what we feel and what we need in a given moment, and to engage those stages of grief through that spiral practice that's designed to help us remember our wholeness, to remember our true self. And so you and I had a chance to play with some curriculum to create something from this many years now observation and alchemy that and then you invited me into exploring this connection between the stages of grief and the Reiki precepts. And we're ready to share that with all of you, dear listeners, in the form of a course. And so we have a few questions for you to think about.
Are you curious about what it could mean to grieve well?
Would you like to reframe your grief journey and your relationship to it in community with others?
Are you looking to explore grief from a place that is grounded yet expansive?
And if you're a Reiki practitioner or you're Reiki curious, are you curious about what it could look like to integrate grief into your Reiki practice, or integrate your Reiki practice into working with others around their grief? We've created a 7-week journey to explore the 5 stages of grief through the lens of the Reiki precepts, the principles that, as I said, form the foundation of the system of Reiki from its Japanese origins. In this way, we'll deepen our understanding of what it means to grieve well, possibly even coming to see our grief as a profound friend, as a guide into the deepest places of our hearts.
Part workshop, part ritual, and entirely heartful, this gathering will create a powerful container within which to explore our own experiences of grief. And in doing so, we will help each other recontextualize grief so that we can see it as the profound teacher and friend that it is, reminding us that, as Francis Weller teaches, grief and love are sisters.
I'm so excited about getting to do this with you and getting to do this for our community. We've spent, like I said, years now in conversation inside of our colleague community about the connections between Reiki, the precepts, and the practice of grieving well. And it's something that our world desperately needs, because holding on to grief, not allowing it to move through us, to transform us, to reconnect us with the love that it grew from in the first place, is part of what creates dis-ease, disharmony, and quite a bit of cruelty in this world, I would dare to say. And so we're really excited to offer this class to you starting in January. It's going to be a 7-week live on Zoom class that will really create a beautiful container for exploring this work. And because we are inspired by the work of Francis Weller and his assertion that grief and love are sisters, we also want to bundle this class with another that is coming up in April, an exploration of the Book of Joy, which is one of my most sacred texts. I've been learning and teaching from that book for many years since it was published. And joy and love being at the foundation of who we are as humans, our natural experience of humans, really prompted me to create that class as an exploration of the teachings and the practices offered by the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu through the Book of Joy. That will be a 10-week deep dive through that work, and that begins in April. So those two classes are offered either individually or bundled together for a discount if you would like to take a expansive, spacious, beautiful, heartful exploration through the human experience of grief and joy as sisters. We are excited to bring this to you. We will probably be reporting on themes that come through these classes right here on this channel to help keep you engaged, whether or not you join us for the class. We would love to hear your thoughts. What would you want to experience and see in a class such as this? I'd love to hear your experiences of grieving well, or if you're willing to be a little bit tender, of struggling with grieving well. And, maybe we can begin the conversation right here in the comment section before the class even starts. So Blair, thanks so much for jumping on here with me to talk about this thing that you have brought into the world, that you gave me the honor of helping you create, and I look forward to teaching it with you coming up in January. And friends, thank you for watching, for coming along with us on this little discussion. Let us know what you think down below. And as you move into your day, may you be deeply provisioned for whatever it brings you. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, we love you. Goodbye.